Okay, so we've covered workflow and how to create a scamp. Now we're going to dive into the InDesign application. I'm going to familiarize you with the workspace, in other words, the interface of InDesign, and also just show you, when I say views, how you can kind of move around, zoom in and zoom out, and get comfortable kind of making your way around within the application as you're doing your layout. So the first thing I want to bring to your attention about all this is that I've created a sheet for shortcuts. So you'll find it here on La Lima, and I will also email it to you all. It's a Microsoft Word document, and this is what it looks like. And I'd actually recommend maybe pulling it up. And actually, this is the one for views, so hold on a second. Okay, this is it. It does have the shortcuts for views, as you can see here. That's, in other words, zooming in and zooming out and looking at different pieces of your layout as you go. But it also has these other commands. So I recommend maybe opening this document, downloading it either from your email or from La Lima, and trying to follow along and practice as I go through the instructions. Without further ado, let's go ahead and pull up InDesign. And what we want to do now is create a new project. Okay, so I can either hit this button or go to File and Create. And you'll notice, for one thing, we want to make sure that we have a letter-sized image, which is, I think, the default here. But another thing is that we want to make sure that we're doing facing pages, and we actually want 3 pages for the document that we're going to create. Now, why don't we just create 2 pages, because it is a 2-page spread, right? Well, if you create 2 pages, this is what you end up with. Here's 1 page, and then here's the other page over here. So you can't make a spread that way. So you need to create 3 pages, and then when we're going to save this as a PDF, which I'll get to in a minute, we're basically just going to discard this original page. So again, File, New, Document. I'm going to assume this is letter size, and then we've got facing pages there, and we want to make sure to select 3. And now, when we select it, yep, there's that one single page, but here's our spread right here. Okay, so that's the first step to getting rolling on this thing. Now, as we stare at this page, there's a couple of items that I want to point out to you right away. If you remember from my lecture on basic concepts of graphic design, I talked about a gutter. Okay, so now this would be the gutter space in your spread. And if we look online, we can see that, it's typically defined that way. The gutter is typically defined that way. Like, here's the definition: the gutter, alley, creep, the inside margins closest to the spine of the book. Now, having said that, you're going to see that a gutter also refers to the blank space in the column between 2 columns. Okay, so to show you what I mean, here's the gutter as I referred to it, but this space here, this is a column and this is a column, and graphic designers will also refer to these spaces in between columns as the gutters. They're the kind of white spaces that you create with a design to kind of break up the space. Okay, so just a little word about terminology there. Now again, there's the reference to the term bleed, and the idea is that you can see the magenta line is where the actual design is going to sit. This outer area here, when they send it to the printer, they're going to chop that area of the page off. So even though the colors or the design may bleed out to the edge of the page, they're going to chop it there, and that explains what the bleed is all about. Okay, now getting back to our page here, one thing I want to show you is that if you hit the W key, okay, you can get the guides to disappear and reappear. Okay, so that can be helpful in terms of just seeing what you're doing. And again, you're going to find that in my shortcuts. So there it is right there, W for shortcuts. So I would review a bunch of these and play with them to see how they work. Okay. But the next thing I want to show you guys is some basics about the layout and how you want to set this up. So first of all, if you notice, there's this selection up here, and I've got it set to Essentials. So in order for your interface to look like my interface, you have to make sure that you're in this setting. Okay, so make sure you do that first and foremost. Second of all, this whole issue of the pages that we're looking at here. I just want to show you guys how you can kind of change that around and move that around. Okay, so there's two things that if you want to play with the pages, you have to unlock. Okay, the first is that if you saw, I selected spread when we were first setting this up. So this thing is locked in to give us this two-page spread here. Okay, so if I want any flexibility on that, I have to actually go to Document Setup and get rid of, actually it's called not spread, but facing pages. So I'm going to deselect that. Now it's gone ahead and separated those out. Okay, now the second adjustment I need to make is that I need to change allowed document pages to shuffle. I need to deselect that. And once I've done that, I can now move these things however I want. Okay, now I've moved them all together. Can I move them apart? Oh no, look, it won't let me do that. So what I can do though is I can create more pages like that, and then I can take these and I can delete them and I can move them around again like that. Okay, so if you have a, maybe you want to do a brochure and you want it to be 3 panels, you can set this up however you want. I just thought that would be worth showing you all. Some other basics about the interface. So you've got your toolbar here, and these are all, we'll talk about some of the important ones here that you're really going to need. Again, this is kind of a quick and dirty tutorial, so I'm just going to try and give you the basics of what you need here. But another thing to look at, just as you're familiarizing yourself with the interface, is this area here, which is again like a whole bunch of settings, right? And so there's quite a lot going on this interface. And one thing I just want to point out so you understand is that if I'm working on images, then I'm going to want, or just frames and just moving boxes around on everything, I'm going to want this panel. But if I'm going to work on type and text, I'm going to select the type tool. And if you notice, this all changed. Not only did this menu change, so now we've got things about fonts, font sizes, how we want the margins set up, whether we want indents or not, whether we want space when we draw a box between the top of the box and and where the text starts, so we kind of create some white space around the text. All of that we can control here, and not only that, but there's a second panel here. So if you're frustrated that you're not finding a control, like for example, how to create a drop cap, which are those big letters that you would create at the beginning of a paragraph, like the beginning of a chapter in a book or whatever, you would find that kind of thing here. So the drop cap is, well, I don't know, it's somewhere around here. But anyway, I would switch back and forth between these panels, and you'll see all the different options that you have to kind of create, the different sort of features that you want for your layout. But again, this is the quick and dirty version, so I'm not going to get deep into that. Just wanted to show you that this is there. Okay. So one of the things about this interface is that it's you can take all these tools and you can drag them out, you can move them around, and it's very easy to do. One of the things that I would advise you to do is to add this tool here. Okay, so you'll find that it doesn't come with this, but if you add the paragraph style here. And the reason why I want you to do that is that when you start playing with text, you can create these presets so that it's very easy to repeat the style that you develop. So if you want something in a certain font size, with a certain boldness, with certain indentations, you don't have to do that over and over and over again. You can just save that as a paragraph style, and it's very simple to do. Create just like this, and so now we're back to a two-page spread. So the next thing I want to show you all is what I'm calling views, which is just that. It's how you kind of move around, zoom in and out of your document. And that might seem like no big deal, but when you're trying to move shapes and spaces and things like that, it's the sooner that you get familiar with how to zoom in and out, the sooner you can work efficiently. Okay, so obviously some really simple ones are if on the Mac, if you hit Command plus plus, that should zoom you in. Okay, if you hit Command 0, it goes back to default. Command minus minus zooms you out. That's pretty straightforward. If you simply hit the letter Z, this turns into like kind of a magnifying glass, and then at any point that where you want to zoom in on your layout, you just bring this up and click on it, and it zooms that part in. And again, I can just go back with Command 0 to default. If you just want to grab your layout and move around, there's this hand tool here, so you can do that. And then I'm going to show you something which I find really helpful, but it's kind of a real pain in the butt to set up. So it's going to take a minute to explain it, so if you want to skip this part, I just want to show you one zoom tool that I find really helpful. So what you do basically is you've got to disable a couple things, because unfortunately, even though it's a great tool, it overlaps with some of your other shortcuts on the Mac. So you got to go into Preferences, and at least for the time being, you have to disable the shortcut for Spotlight. Okay, so that would be right here. Okay, I've already disabled it for now because I was planning to do this. And then actually, oddly enough, it now interferes with Siri as well. So if you go to Siri, you'll find that this is the typical command and space is the typical shortcut for Siri. So you need to turn that off as well. And then one final thing you have to do to set up this power zoom is you have to go into Preferences and then go to GPU Performance. And then I've deselected it. You need to deselect Animated Zoom, click OK. So now that you've done all that, you're able to use the power zoom. And what that looks like is if you hold down the Command key and the space bar and click on your mouse, then you can zoom in like that. And now I'm going to hit Command and 0 to go back to default. But that I find extremely helpful in terms of just trying to move around your layout space. So, and that's pretty much it for all the views and just for a basic tour of the workspace.